Thank you, Ahmed and Elia, for the introduction. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all to the second panel discussion for today. It gives me immense pleasure and I feel honored to be the moderator of this panel. Dear audience, our theme and topic for today's panel discussion includes a very serious social problem that many face in our society but is commonly overlooked. This issue happens to be bullying. This issue is something that should be addressed by everyone and should be avoided at all costs. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our honorable panelist on board with us. Dr. Qudsiya Tariq. She is a practicing clinical psychologist and current chairperson at Department of Psychology, University of Karachi. She has been associated with many organizations. She is a member of Board of Governor of Institute of Clinical Psychology and member of Advisory Board of Kazan Trust. She is also a member of American Psychological Association, APA, and British Sociological Association, BSA. Dr. Kiran Bashir Ahmed. She is a practicing clinical psychologist associated with the Institute of Professional Psychology, Beira University as a senior assistant professor and head of department. She is a member of the Pakistan Psychological Association, PPA, the Pakistan Association for Cognitive Therapies, PACT, and an executive member of the Fraternity and Literature and Culture, FOLC. Ms. Naima Fatma Sharif. She is a practicing clinical psychologist who is the CEO and co-founder of Kumak, The Journey to Wellness. She is also serving as a treasurer of Pakistan Society of Excellence in Psychology, PSEP. Ms. Shabnam Arshi. She is a practicing clinical psychologist associated with Institute of Professional Psychology, Beira University as a lecturer. Ms. Nadia Hussain. She is a Pakistan television actress, host, supermodel, entrepreneur and a fashion designer. I would like to thank everyone for gathering for this important discussion. To set the table for discussion to come, let me begin to reflect on the topic that we've all been there. The playground, where one girl grabs another's hair and yanks her backward off the swing. The lunchroom, where the mean kid smacks down a smaller boy's tray, spilling his food. Or the classroom, where a group of kids repeatedly taunt the youngest child in the class for being different. It's been around as long as our kids become independent. The point that needs our attention is not only that it can lead to violence, but it also ruins lives in other ways, turning their happy places into places where fear and seething hatred makes it hard for them to function. So Dr. Kiran, I would like to start with you. We all know that not all bullies are the same. Each has a different style and uses different tactics to intimidate and control their victims. And many people still believe that bullying only consists of either physical or name calling. So I would want you to define what actually bullying is, what are the types of bullying, and how common is it?
Bullying basically is, we can say, a set of behaviors that is malicious in intent and usually does cause harm to another person. It does impinge on the rights of another individual, and that's why we say that it is harmful intent. Now this intent, it's important to understand, might in some cases not be very obvious to the bully himself or herself. It might be something that is partially subconscious or is a manifestation of a very unconscious hostile intent. And that's why when it comes to the fore, another person might end up feeling, now we're talking about a bully and a victim now at the other end. So a victim might end up feeling insecure, might end up feeling uncomfortable in another person's presence, and that's usually due to these undercurrents of hostility that are in that relationship. Okay, now the relationship between a bully and a victim is unique because we are looking at a case where not every victim might feel those effects very directly. It might not always be in the form of physical hurt or, let's say, verbal abuse that comes in. It might be those very subtle undercurrents that we feel between a bully and a victim, where a victim feels that he's uncomfortable in the presence of the bully. A victim might feel that they're actually being overtaken by some very unpleasant feelings there. And now when it comes to the types of the bullying, that also is along these lines, because now a bully might actually be doing some physical harm, so it might come in the category of physical abuse. It could also come in the category of verbal abuse, and it can also come in the category of non-verbal abuse. And while physical and verbal are very obvious, because of course in physical you'll have perhaps a parent or a teacher or maybe even another child who is bullying another child, but and of course you'll see physical marks there, you'll see beatings, or you'll see different things that are direct actions. In verbal, of course, it's again very obvious, because there might be swear words or cuss words being used. There might be different things that come in terms of sarcasm or direct or indirect remarks on the person's appearance, on the person's overall bearing, personality. There might be multiple things coming in. But when we come to the hostile issues, that's a bit more indirect, and I would say more manipulative, subtle, but quite often very damaging. Because we're looking at a person, a bully, who uses very manipulative means to get to an end, which is undermine the very self-esteem of this victim. And that's where it hurts the more. It has long-term repercussions, and in terms of hostile intent, it's actually the worst. So when we are looking at these subtypes, they do constitute the type of action being taken, but along with that, there's a larger construct here. There's a social construct. So when we are looking at social bullying, that carries repercussions for not just perhaps a child, it carries repercussions overall for society. And that might be in terms of how the majority in a certain classroom even treats a minority. It could be in terms of, a child who has just come into a new school perhaps, and that child feels victimized because there are those social norms that have already been set. And in terms of grouping, there might be groups that are unwilling to let an outsider in because he or she is still being seen as an outsider. That's also a form of bullying. So little things like turning away when a person approaches you, little things like actually making snide remarks about their appearance, or the fact that they have come from a school that wasn't perhaps at par with the school that they're currently in. All of those things are tantamount to bullying. Bullying is more common than we think. People might not exactly understand that in schools, people are coming in with different ideas, with different images in their head, different types of personalities, and that also comes in with children, with teachers. Now, you might have a child going into a school where he or she comes from a setup or a background that is different from perhaps a lot of other children, so that might be a minority grouping, and quite often that child might be bullied because of it. There might be teachers who have certain set patterns, ideas, patterns related to how a child should or should not behave in their minds. And now they might do some things, or they might say some things that would affect the child indirectly. Sometimes, while we might think that this is just part of our normal setup, it would actually come in as bullying if the teacher repeats it too often, or if the child indirectly feels very uncomfortable. So we might not even realize it, but bullying is then more common than we think. However, there's a difference between bullying behavior and being actually labeled a bully. So while a person, a teacher, or even a student, another peer might not be labeled a bully as such, there might be certain times when we unwittingly go in toward bullying behavior, and we might not even realize it. So that's that little difference that I just want to point out in order to make it clear that we might not always be labeled as bullies, and not everyone can even label themselves a victim. Otherwise, it might be just very easy to say that, oh, I'm a victim of such and such behavior, and therefore I should be treated differently, or I should be treated nicely. And that's a victim mindset, which it is very easy to get into, because then we kind of get into a rut of things, and we end up feeling that we are special, or we should be treated differently, and that we have been a victim of abuse or neglect in some way, and we deserve special treatment. So that also then creates more bullying in future, because then the victim turns into there's this vicious cycle that comes up, and the victim might next turn into an aggressor and turn into a bully by actually playing the victim card. So we always have to be very careful in when we're defining such things and attributes.
Thank you, Dr. Kiran, for your explanation. So Dr. Kutsia, my question to you is, what are the traumatic effects of bullying on a child?
Before I start on my conversation about how trauma is going to affect the child after being bullied, what is bullying? The question arises, what is bullying? Bullying is basically a systematic abuse of power. Now, why would a child do that? There are different reasons why a child would be bullying the other child. It's basically when a child himself or herself finds themselves to be weak, they start gaining that power by abusing people who are weaker than them. So if the abuse continues like this and the child is constantly under stress, what is going to happen? The child is going to be psychologically affected, it's going to be physically affected, and it's going to be emotionally affected. First thing the child will do is socially isolate oneself. After isolating, what will happen? The child will stop interacting with anybody, even the nearby people, families, close relatives. The child will completely vanish or will not be interacting with any kind of even closer relationships. The child will start avoiding school, will not be meeting up with people, friends, and even the peer group he would be avoiding. So if this bullying behavior continues and the child does not discuss it with anybody at home, or the parents or the family do not point out that the bullying is happening to the child, so what is going to happen? What is going to be the result and the consequences of being bullied constantly at a school place or at a playground or in the neighborhood? So what's going to happen? The child is going to socially isolate. The child will withdraw from all the social relationships and would lock himself or herself behind the closed doors, and this will be due to the constant feeling of shame. The child would not want to interact with people because they would call him names and would be making fun of the child, so the child avoids interacting with any kind of interaction outside his or her room. Social isolation is going to lead to feeling of shame, which will further deteriorate the condition, and the child will avoid going to school. After avoiding going to school, the child is going to be performing very poor on his or her academics. Once the academics start affecting, again the shaming will start further. The child will be bullied for poor grades, and again if the child is having any other issue, that will be highlighted further. Since bullying is going to happen every day, now and then, with the child at school, the school becomes a big nightmare for the child. So the child would not want to go to school, the child would not want to study, the child would not want to see the teachers, because teachers, according to the child, are not validating his or her feelings. Maybe it's just a doubt, because teachers play a very important role, and if a teacher does not validate what's happening around, the child would avoid going to the institution. Further, the abuse would result in bad eating habits. The child will start binging on food, the child will start having junk food frequently and eating at the wrong times, eating too much of sweet, and further the child will stop, or the other way around, the child might become anorexic and would stop eating anything at all. There will be a frequent loss of weight and a frequent loss of appetite seen in a child. This behavior will further lower the self-esteem of a child. The child basically would not be feeling competent enough to move around in the peer group, and even during the sleep time also becomes a nightmare. The child has frequent nightmares during that. There will be bedwetting seen in the child. Bedwetting can also further shame a child, because if a child is 8 years old and starts bedwetting after being bullied, so again the family also starts pointing it out, so it becomes more shameful for the child. The self-esteem would further lower down. So again, what's going to happen now? The child will start having different somatic complaints. There are going to be psychosomatic complaints like headaches, like ache in the back, ache in the legs, stomach aches. A lot of complaints, psychosomatic complaints, will be frequently observed, because the child would avoid or try to pretend or try to pose that the child is unwell and is suffering through some physiological disorder. So what is happening here? The child is under tremendous amount of stress due to the bullying factor, and that bullying factor is also affecting the psychological well-being. So if I talk about psychological well-being, what's happening here? The child might be at risk of developing anxiety disorders, because the child has already started bedwetting, is having sleep disturbances, is having eating problems. So now the child would be, getting into, or would say that it's becoming difficult for a child to cope up and will enter into depression. The sadness of element, because no one, according to the child, is able to understand and comprehend what the child is going through. Further, this bullying will be also resulting in post-traumatic stress disorder. It would not end here, but this nightmare of bullying is carried out throughout the life. The person is unable to overcome unless it is being validated by people close by and are pointed out that yes, this happened, it wasn't good, and we are standing right next to you. A kind of a social support, if it is not being rendered at the right time, it can actually disturb the child for lifetime, and not only disturb, the personality development will come to a full stop, and the child will be not a confident, not a competent child. Although the child might be having, there are likely chances that the child is very skillful, very talented and very intelligent, but the child will not be able to express that due to invalidation during that time.
Thank you, Dr. Kutsia. That was very insightful. Not only can bullying seriously affect children who bully, but it also may cause children who observe or witness bullying to feel anxious or helpless. Coming back to Dr. Kiran, my next question to you would be, what are the long-term impacts of bullying, both on the bully and the victim? Also, I would like you to share your thoughts on how it creates a barrier in building close relationship with peers and family.
Bullying, of course, doesn't go without its impacts and its side effects. Now, they are not just on the bully, but they are on people in the environment as well. And of course, the tension in the environment that builds up contributes to all of that. A bully is a person who, while acting aggressively or while actually being hostile, creates this barrier around him or her which separates him from the rest. And quite often in the workplace, we use this idea that it's lonely at the top. Absolutely, it is very true that bullying does create barriers in building close relationships with family and with friends and with others around in the environment. I can just give you one small example here, which is a case where family members might feel that we're doing something that is actually going to help this person. We're helping him to toughen up. We're helping him to actually take more control of the situation and be more in control. But however, that's not the case. So a parent can indirectly become a bully, or a teacher can indirectly become a bully by doing that behavior. In such cases, obviously the child in question feels that I can never be close to my family members because they are not taking on the role of a nurturing, caring parent or nurturing, caring teacher and an adult who's supposed to take care of me as a child. Of course, even when there are relationships inbuilt between peers, the same can happen. Another thing that happens as a result then is that this behavior gets generalized in the mind of the victim and gets generalized in the mind of the bully. The bully perceives that I can perhaps control everything and every circumstance, every situation around me. And no person really wants to be controlled, in effect. And the victim, in effect, feels, we would say in the longer sense, paranoia, and in the shorter term, suspicion of everyone's intentions and actions. And therefore, there will definitely be barriers when they're trying to make those relationships. More so when they're trying to build relationships in future with their spouses, with a different family in future, and also working with people in general.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kiran. You summed it up very well. Definitely, it's not just one person's responsibility to cater to individuals' needs, but the whole system is involved, which includes parents, teachers, and psychologists. In some cases, kids who are bullied are also bullies themselves. The sad part comes later, when they reach adulthood and experience long-lasting psychological effects that are more severe than the experience by either bullies or the victim alone. So Ms. Naima, I would like you to share your thoughts on how a teacher or a parent can identify if a child is going through bullying.
Bullying can take various forms. There is physical bullying, verbal bullying, sexual bullying, and cyberbullying. Most of the research suggests that bullying generally happens in schools, and schools are considered to be hotspots for bullying in children. And therefore, the role of a teacher and that of a parent is very important when it comes to identifying whether a child is going through bullying or not. There are several indicators that one needs to be mindful of. We'll be talking about those indicators step by step. Firstly, whenever a child is coming home from school, it's very important to notice how they appear once they come home. Sometimes children come home with bruises, they come home with cuts, they come home with torn clothes, and they come home with missing items, be it their stationery, be it their storybooks, their lunch, their water bottles, etc. This is an indicator, meaning something happened at school that one needs to closely follow up. A sudden change in the mood of your child is also a possible indicator for bullying. Sometimes children start to avoid topics regarding the school. They refuse to complete their classwork, they refuse to complete their homework, they fail to get things ready when it comes to going to school. They'll throw tantrums when it comes to sleeping at night before going to school. And likewise, take a lot of time to get dressed up the next morning. Sometimes children also complain of headaches and stomach aches. These could also be excuses to avoid school. And sometimes it's their stress that is being manifested in physical forms. And therefore, you need to pay close attention to these signs. You might also notice a sudden decline in the grades of your child. A child who was maybe at one time very enthusiastic to go to school and to study for particular tests, now refuses to study, now refuses to show their homework to you. So as a teacher and as a parent, it's very important to identify if you notice a sudden decline in the grades and participation of a student in your class. Sometimes very verbal children can suddenly go silent. They refuse to participate in class activities. They refuse to pair with certain students in class. You might also notice that some children become loners when they are being bullied. They might refuse to go out of the classroom at time of recess, during their sports period, and when it comes to doing paired activities in schools. Children can also complain of disturbed sleep. They could also have bad dreams, nightmares, and wake up all of a sudden. A change in personality and a change in mood is also very important when it comes to identifying whether a child is being bullied or not. Sometimes very confident children can become very silent when they are being bullied. Sometimes very calm children can become very aggressive. You might notice that a child is having frequent crying spells. For the number one indicator to be mindful of is a personality change in your student, in your child. As a teacher, pay close attention to these signs. And as a parent, please pay close attention to how your child is coming home, how your child is reacting to topics related to the school. Is your child throwing any tantrums? Is your child refusing to talk about schools? Also notice when there is a change in the friend circle of a child. Sometimes what happens is that children have very solid friend groups in schools, and you would suddenly notice them complaining about their friends in schools. They might tell you that they are not friends with certain people in school. You might notice that your child has changed their friend circle in school, and that could also be an indicator. These are all possible signs that one needs to be very mindful of, and they help a teacher and a parent in identifying whether their child is going through bullying or not. You might also notice a change in their appetite. Sometimes children refuse to eat. Sometimes children refuse to sleep. They might also complain of not interacting with certain people of the school outside school premises. Children might avoid going to their friends' places. They might start avoiding playtime. They might refuse to invite certain people from school to their places as well. And therefore, these are all signs that need to be given close attention. As a teacher, it's not only your responsibility to be mindful of how your students are in your particular class, but also noticing how they are interacting with one another at the time of their recess, identifying how they're interacting with one another during their sports period. And as a parent, Make sure that you're aware of the friends group in which your child is, their reaction when it comes to going to school, topics regarding the school. And these are all possible indicators that can let us know whether a child is going through bullying at school or not.
Thank you very much, Ms. Naima. Since we have discussed about bullying and the victims, now I would like to call upon Ms. Nadia Hussain to share her experience having gone through bullying and also how did it affect her mental health.
So yes, of course, as a human, I think that's part of, growing up to experience some level of bullying. And I think that, it does help you, personally I feel it does help you in making you a bit perhaps stronger later on in life when, you do realize that the person who is bullying you is actually the one who is at fault because they are the ones who are wrong. जब आपको ये एक realization हो जाती है तो फिर वो जो चीज़ है वो आपको काफ़ी कुछ मुझे लगता है सिखा देती है and that is something that one I think needs to. For me personally, I don't really remember being bullied when I was a child. I mean, I don't exactly remember being bullied, but since I got into the field of media, there wasn't, I don't know if I can really term the word verbally harassing as bullying because that is what happens now, like you're verbally harassed. And so I would say that yes, that is perhaps part of bullying, where they're just trying to belittle you and assassinate your character and if one has an opinion or if if they don't even, I mean there could be any reason that they are going to say things. So and that of course has happened more with the advent of social media, with us having more access to people, more access to the public, so that has happened more nowadays. But for me personally, I feel that when I know that if I have said something or if I'm doing something, and especially if it is not hurting anybody, and on the flip side, if that is something that for that particular action or that for that particular post of mine or whatever that I have posted, on that if I'm getting harassed or bullied, especially if I know that and I believe that what I have said is right, then I really don't, in fact I fight back, like that's my mechanism of trying to prove myself right, that I fight back and I don't let them affect me mentally because I know that what I'm saying is right. So other than that, I actually do have a very, I would say that maybe you can call it having like a feisty kind of personality, that I don't allow anybody to belittle me, and I do fight back, so, and I don't really let it affect my mental health because I think I know that they are the ones who are wrong. I truly feel that confidence really matters. आपका जो confidence है वो, that is the utmost in giving you that kind of that it bucks you up, that you can fight back. If you're not confident, then that becomes a problem. But I do feel that the confidence is not something that develops, that is, it can be in you inborn as well, and you can develop it over time as well. So for me personally, I don't think I was born this way. I have been I have conditioned myself, and the circumstances have conditioned me in such a way that when I felt like that things and people were behaving in a certain way which is wrong. It just made me realize that, like, I cannot let them continue behaving the way that they're behaving, and I had to, like, fight back. And once I fought back, I realized that, they do back off. I mean, the bullies do back off. So, that is something that really gave me that, I think that was the impetus, like, that the ball started rolling from there, that, once I fought back, I realized that, yeah, I mean, like, this is not something that it's going to, that it helps. I mean, to fight back, it helps. So I think, like, then for the next time I had more himmat, and then the next time I had more himmat. So yeah, that's how it has built over time. But there are a lot of kids who are born very confident. So I think that they actually have a slightly better advantage, and in that case, in fact, they can be the bullies. If they are overconfident, then they can be the bullies instead. So, being overconfident is not good, but being confident enough to fight, that is where, you need to differentiate whether you are yourself the bully or whether you are fighting against a bully.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nadia, for your willingness to participate. This is something of a very sensitive topic where we often avoid talking about it. Coming back to you, Ms. Naima, what should the role be of parents in handling if their child is going through bullying?
As a parent, when you find out that your child is being bullied at school, it's of course a very tough situation, and it's a situation that needs to be handled very tactfully. There are a few things that parents can do that could help a child who's being bullied at school. Firstly, this is something that one needs to start in their house, that parents need to have a very open communication with children. Try to have an environment in your house where you can talk to your children about anything, and your child can talk to you about anything. Also, it's very important as parents to prepare our children for the world. School bullying, as unfortunate as it is also something that's very common. And a lot of children go through this when they are at school. So as parents, it is our responsibility to teach our children about these things, is to let them know that things like these can happen in the world, and therefore having a very open conversation with them. Tell them about bullying. Tell them that they should always report things to you whenever something like this happens. As a parent, when your child comes and confides in you that they are being bullied, it's very normal as a parent to have an emotional reaction there. But the most important thing at that point in time is to be calm and to not let your emotions take over. Listen to your child patiently and carefully, and ask them what they would want you to do in this situation. Also, it's very important for us to let our children know that the fact that they are being bullied is not their fault. Being bullied does not mean that there is something wrong with them. And tell them that there's something wrong with the bully and not with them if they are the victims. Ask your child for what help they would need. And then try to convince them that you are their partner in this journey, and don't ever make them feel alone. As parents, it's very normal for us to sometimes have reactions towards our children. Like, this is your battle, fight it yourself. You need to stand up for yourself. How can somebody just come and say anything to you? Why don't you speak up for yourself? And it's at moments like these when we let our children know that they're alone and they need to fight their own battles. As much as we would want them to be independent, it's very important to assure that our support is always with them. This is a situation that you need to handle together with your child, and not at any moment make your child feel that he is alone. For the most important thing is to have an open communication and dialogue with your child, where your child can come and speak to you. Also, if you feel that there's something unusual with your child, and if your child is acting in a way which is not very normal for him or her, speak to them. Ask them questions. Ask them about how their day was at school. Bring up topics like bullying in your discussion as parents, and let them know that they are not alone. The most important thing for your child to know is that they're not alone, and there are many others who are going through similar issues as them. Now, what you want to do is to help your child stand up against bullying. There are certain things that you need to teach your children to do, and there are certain things that you need to help them accomplish. It's very important to have role plays with children where you play the bully. This is just an example where you play the bully and your child plays his part. You give them different situations and tell them to enact those situations so that they know how to act in front of a bully. A mistake that we make very often is we teach our children to be aggressive in front of bullies. One thing that's important to know over here, that majority of the children who are being bullied are usually vulnerable children who sometimes do not know how to stand up for themselves. And as much as we would want them to learn this skill, it's a gradual thing. So if you teach your child to deal aggressively with bullies, chances are that they would be bullied even more. Ask them to move around in groups. Ask them to have support groups in schools. Maybe talking to their teacher. Most of the schools, in fact, every school has a policy against bullying or have rules that are very strict and they do not allow bullying. As a parent, it is your responsibility to communicate issues of bullying to your child's class teacher. Involve them, make a plan with them as to how these instances of bullying can stop. Working on your child's self-confidence, working on making your child learn other skills that they can do in order to stop bullying. Example, verbalizing their emotions when they're being bullied or when they're being called names. Bullying does not always have to be very extreme, even though there are severe cases of bullying. But sometimes your child is being fat shamed in school, body shamed in school. People are making fun of them because of their ethnicity, because of their caste. So it's important to teach your children to voice their emotions over there. That I do not like it when you call me by these names because this is my name. So having role plays when your children learn other things. Also giving them other ways of coping. Because what happens is that sometimes children associate their self-esteem with bullying, which is a very natural thing to do. So appreciating your child, praising their progress every time they stand up, even if it's the smallest of stand that they've taken, appreciate their progress. Involve them in other things so that their self-esteem is also built during this while. So not only focusing all your attention on the bullying, but also doing other things with the child, having open communication, involving the school in this plan being made for bullying, are all ways that can help your child. Sometimes the issues of bullying are so severe and they affect a child's self-esteem, and bullying can also lead to other mental health issues. Therefore, it's important to approach counselors. It's important to approach psychologists when you feel that the emotional reaction of your child is something that is extreme. This is something that you can deal with as parents, and the most important thing is to have an open communication, showing your support to your child, teaching your children coping methods to deal with bullying, and also involving your school in this process.
Thank you, Ms. Naima, for sharing your valuable thoughts. Now, Ms. Shabnam Arshi, can you tell us how therapy processes the trauma of a child going through bullying?
Okay. There are a variety of therapies available for this process, but especially in bullying case, we have to understand the type of bullying. Like in case interpersonal type of bullying, which most of the children faced, we have to teach or process the emotions and the emotion regulation of that client. Especially in the ADHD, the children with ADHD, they have inability to read social cue from the environment or from the people. So in therapy, we teach this child to learn about the social cues and to monitor their behavior when they are into the environment. Then they cannot become a victim of bullying. So before they become a victim of bullying, they have to understand this social cue. So the therapy is focused towards the emotional understanding, and then the emotion regulation of this social cue. The second and very important thing is about the self concept and the self-esteem, that I am the strong one. So the second process of the therapy is to enlighten the self-esteem of the child and provide the empowerment. Then we work towards the long-term therapeutic process. Like if the trauma is a long-term trauma, so there are a lot of therapies which provide the long-term exposure-based therapeutic techniques. Okay, these techniques focus towards the association between the therapeutic techniques and the trauma. Okay, they develop lot of environmental association, they develop lot of other association with the trauma. So if they are into the academic settings, we talk about this environmental association. If they are into any other interpersonal setting, we talk about that type of association. There are another therapy which focus on the cognitive aspect and the analytical aspect of the child. Psychoanalytical therapy in term of the CBT, both of the combination sometime we use. EMDR is also a very good choice with these children. In my experience, the two therapies are really work with these children. One is art therapy and second is a play therapy. Child-centered play therapy is also seems to be very effective with dealing with the bullying cases. In play therapy, especially in a child-centered play therapy, puppet play really works so good with this type of cases. These puppets can be into the different natures, into the different type of environment, and while we are playing with the puppets with the children, they learn to understanding about the social cue and then the respond. We provide them a script how to respond, and this is also linked with the toolkit for the child. As being a therapist, there is a task that you provide a toolkit to the child that when this type of behavior will happen with you again, then what should be in your bag and what thing you should pull out from their bag, and they can use this technique with their environment or with their interpersonal settings.
Thank you, Ms. Arshi. That was very informative. Dr. Kutsia, coming back to you, I would like you to share your thoughts on what one must do when their child is a bully.
Now the question is very important question, that what if my own child is bullying someone? What could be the reasons? So we start searching for reasons outside. We have to look for the reasons inside. Inward reason or inward analysis is very important, because there is something that the child, I always say that the children are like sponge. Whatever they see, just like a sponge would absorb it, the child would absorb it. So maybe something is happening around in the house, the child himself had been bullied and has learned that this is the way to gain power. So the child starts bullying outside and feels much stronger by doing that. There could be other reason that the child wants to fit in a group of popular students who usually bully others and get famous, and people enjoy their company. So just trying to be part of that group and trying to be popular, the child will start bullying. So we have to see that what is happening and why the child, what is the need for a child to bully. There has to be a valid reason why a child starts bullying. It could be a learned behavior as well. At times the children, they try to gain attention. If the parents are not giving them sufficient attention, at times, or the teacher is not giving much time in the classroom, so the child will start bullying other children, so that the parents and the school teacher starts paying more attention, and they become again the apple of an eye for everyone in the classroom, and they are getting more attention as compared to a child who is performing very well. The other possibility could be, there are very rare chances that the other possibility could be that by nature the child is very assertive and impulsive, and the child starts bullying other children. So there is very few chances of that. Mostly it is found that it's a learned behavior and the child does it to gain power. The child is basically learning everything from the environment. If the child perceives that there is negativity, there is a lot of anger against the child, the child starts reacting to that, and then the reaction will result in a kind of bullying. The child might mock people, might make fun, might play pranks with the child. So there can be a lot of ways a child can bully. So the question here is that what needs to be done in order to avoid this bullying factor. What the teachers need to do in the first place is that to keep a vigilant eye what is happening in the classroom, why the child has started reacting in certain way, and then speak to the parents about it. The parents need to see that is there anything wrong that is going on around with the siblings? Is there anything going wrong at the playground where the child goes, or in the neighborhood where the child goes to play, or is there anything wrong with the friends that the child has recently made? So if parents start observing, giving them time, paying attention and being there with them, the peers also need to understand that if there is a weakness shown by any of their siblings, they don't need to mock, they need to help. This kind of a behavior should be motivated and encouraged at home and at school, at both places, and bullying can be stopped. Bullying is just a power play. So if power play is controlled and self-control is being taught to the child and the reasons are being told, so this will automatically come to a full stop.
Thank you, Dr. Kutsia. That was such an insightful information. So, Miss Arshi, a lot of children must be hearing this. Can you help how they can avoid or address bullying?
Okay. The main message for these children is that bullying is just one experience. This is not your life. This is not coloring your life. That was one patch of your life. That was one event. Rather, instead of saying that my life is being this was one event. We have lot of event in our life. तो फॉर द स्पेशली मैं बच्चों से ही कहना चाहूँगी कि अगर एक दफ़ा उनकी ज़िंदगी में ऐसा हो गया या बार बार हुआ है तो वो इवेंट था. सो अंडरस्टैंड दैट वाई दैट वाज हैपन टू दैम. एंड सेकेंडली, अगर कोई बुली कर रहा है तो वो उसका प्रॉब्लम है. ओके, दिस बिहेवियर इज़ विद दैट चाइल्ड. ये आपका प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. आपने अंडरस्टैंड करना है कि अच्छा मैं ही क्यों टारगेट बन रहा हूँ, मेरे साथ ऐसा क्या है जिसकी वजह से मैं टारगेट बन रहा हूँ. सो उस चीज़ को आपने हैंडल करना होगा. सेकेंडली, सेंस ऑफ ह्यूमर इज़ अ ग्रेट थिंग. ओके, इफ समबडी इज़ डूइंग दिस तो वो एक्चुअली पावर गेम के साथ है. आप उसकी पावर को बहुत आराम से फेल कर सकते हैं बाय द सेंस ऑफ ह्यूमर कि दिस डजंट मैटर. ठीक है, पता नहीं आपके साथ ऐसा क्या है, क्यों नहीं समझ आई आपको ये बात. Okay, if you are taking this type of name for me, so what should be your name? I think we have to consider. And आपके टूल बॉक्स में, आपके थैले में बहुत सारी चीज़ें होनी चाहिए जो आप इस सिचुएशन में यूज़ करेंगे. एंड एम्पावरमेंट, स्ट्रॉन्ग, यू आर द सेम. जो बुली कर रहा है हमेशा याद रखना कोई चीज़ की कमी है, इसीलिए वो आपसे वो पावर के थ्रू लेना चाहता है. डोंट गिव दिस पावर, होल्ड दिस पावर विथ योर सेल्फ. आपको ये अंडरस्टैंड करना है कि ये पावर गेम है. उनके पास नहीं है वो पावर, तो दे वांट टू टेक फ्रॉम यू. वो स्किल जो उनके पास नहीं है, उसकी जेलसी में या जो मैनरिज्म उनके पास नहीं है, वो आपसे लेना चाहते हैं. तो डोंट गिव इट. ओके, और अपने साथ ये पावर आपने रखनी है. जैसे एक बच्चा है, स्कूल में उसको फिजिकली हरास कर रहे थे, बहुत कमज़ोर सा था और वो अपने आप को नहीं बचा पाता था. तो एक दिन उसने क्या किया, वो भागा और रन करते हुए, दौड़ते हुए उसने कहा कि मैं प्रिंसिपल के ऑफिस के सामने जा रहा हूँ और अब मैं ज़रूर कंप्लेन करूँगा. सो दैट वॉज द पावर ही यूज़ फॉर हिमसेल्फ कि आइंदा मेरे साथ ऐसा मत करना, मेरे पास इस बात की पावर है कि मैं कंप्लेन कर सकता हूँ या मैं ये बात बता सकता हूँ. एंड यूज़ सेंस ऑफ ह्यूमर एंड यूज़ अदर थिंग्स. ओके, आपके इर्द गिर्द के लोग बहुत अच्छे हैं, उनसे सपोर्ट लीजिए, उन्हें बताइए, पेरेंट्स को बताइए, अगर स्कूल में हैं तो टीचर्स को ज़रूर बताइए कि मिस इस स्टूडेंट के साथ कुछ प्रॉब्लम है, ही बिहेव वेरी डिफरेंटली. डोंट से दैट आई बिहेव डिफरेंटली. Say this student or this group of students behave very differently with me. Why? What are the problem with these students? Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Shabnam, for your kind words. This starts with a culture of openness and a willingness to intervene. Even as adults, it is difficult for us. So imagine how hard it would be for the children. Therefore, adults must step up to play it first and lead by example. In the end, I would like to conclude my panel discussion by saying that we must continue to encourage public conversations about the effects of bullying so that we can overcome it. And we must let our children know that whatever is happening, they can tell us and we will support them. Thank you so much, our honorable panelists, for your valuable time and our audience for their attention.